Welcome back. Shipping giant Maersk and oil company BP each announcing they will be avoiding the Red Sea route and rerouting vessels to the Cape of Good Hope in southern Africa after a number of attacks on commercial ships by Iranian-backed Houthi rebels, terrorists in Yemen. The U.S. announced a multinational task force to help protect commercial traffic through the Red Sea earlier this week. But the Wall Street Journal is reporting that shipping firms remain on edge. Joining me right now is the CEO of DHL eCommerce Global. He is the Global CEO, Pablo Ciano, joining us right now. DHL eCommerce is one of the divisions of DHL Group and is the world leader in domestic and international parcel delivery. Pablo, it's great to see you.
Nice to see you again.
Thank you so much for joining us. You say you're actively monitoring the situation. What can you tell us in terms of the Red Sea and the threats there that exist?
Yeah, it's a very fluid situation. We are monitoring very closely. Some customers are already beginning to ask us for alternative for either air freight or other alternative routes for shipping. Too early to say what will be the impact. We don't think that it's going to be the same as what we have seen before with the Suez Canal or in the middle of the pandemic where we saw the congestions in ports. But it's too early to say, and we're monitoring that very closely.
Yeah, I mean, clearly, if you've got to reroute ships to go underneath and around Africa, that's a much longer route. What would be the biggest impact if you had to reroute ships?
It will take longer, for sure.
And more expensive because you need more oil, right?
More expensive, yeah. It will take longer, more expensive. We're already seeing some ocean freight rates, spot rates, increasing compared to what it was a week ago. But it will take longer, for sure.
So you're expecting rates to stay elevated? Wouldn't that impact the inflation story? Somebody's got to pass that on to the consumer, right?
Too early to say how much will be the impact. We have dealt with this before many times, from the COVID situation all the way into 15 years ago with the volcano in Iceland, where we had to reroute a lot of air traffic through different means of transportation. So I think that we are going to be able to help our customers resolve this in the best possible way and with least impact on transit times and costs as well.
Pablo, tell us about business today. How is DHL eCommerce doing?
We're doing well. We're doing well, given, despite of the macro complexities that we are all dealing with, we are flying at a much higher altitude compared to pre-pandemic. So this year is going to be a very good year for us, in line with expectations, in line with our guidance to the capital markets. Peak season has been very encouraging, in line with what we were planning. The week of Cyber Monday, we delivered 100 million packages around the world,
which was
impressive, and which is an incredible work from all our 600,000 employees around the world. As we like to say, every single shipment count, and every single of those 100 million packages were delivered on time to our customers. So I'm very happy. And this week is also going to be looking very strong.
That's fantastic. Good for you. What's driving the delivery boom?
Consumers are buying. What we see is that they are buying maybe smaller purchases. So we are seeing a little bit of a decline in the weight per shipment. So it's the same amount of purchases in terms of packages, which is good for us, but maybe it's smaller and less expensive purchases that we're seeing.
Interesting. So this morning we're talking about FedEx. The stock is down better than 10, 11% earlier. It is lowering its revenue expectations for the fiscal year. They're talking about weaker demand hitting sales. Pablo, tell us about the environment out there. When you look at the competitive situation, you see what's going on at FedEx. How much is this tied to a macro story that is, in fact, slowing?
There might be some macro in their numbers. The big difference between our competitors and ourselves is that, first, we have a very diversified portfolio geographically and from a service point of view, service line point of view. So we operate in all 220 countries around the world. When China is slowing down, US is doing great. When Europe is down, other region is doing. So we are naturally hedged to compensate for all the macro situation. That is one advantage that we have. And the second one, which is very important, is that we have a very flexible aviation network. Our aviation network, which is a very significant cost component for our numbers, we can flex it out up and down very nicely, and that is allowing us to compensate any type of significant changes in demand. So we see it from our point of view. From our point of view, we are able to cope with all of these different macro situations.
The DHL eCommerce Global Online Shopper Survey, we've got this covering major global markets within the Americas, Europe, Middle East, Africa, Asia Pacific, and China for the first time. This survey found 65% of shoppers said that free delivery would improve the online shopping experience. How significant a cost would that be for you? Free delivery is obviously something everybody wants, especially during the holidays right now.
Yeah. Well, the good news is that free delivery, at least in the eyes of the consumers, is expected to come from the retailers and the merchants. So, of course, that put pressure on our pricing discipline and all of that. But what was really remarkable from a delivery perspective was that consumers were very interested in having sustainable deliveries, so carbon neutral deliveries. So everyone considers that very, very important. But interesting is that 28%, only 28% of consumers were willing to pay extra for a free delivery. So it's a little bit of a dilemma, right? Everyone wants to have everyone wants to have a sustainable delivery. Nobody wants to pay.
Yeah, exactly.
But what is also interesting was that 50% of the consumers are willing to wait longer for the packages. So they don't want to pay. But if the delivery comes in 3 days versus 2 days and is carbon neutral or with a reduced carbon footprint, they're willing to do so. So it's a little bit of an interesting dilemma.
Interesting from that global survey. What about rates? Let's talk here for a second, because this whole question about shipping around the Red Sea and the Suez Canal has everyone expecting that rates are going to stay elevated, and that is one of the issues with inflation. How would you characterize inflation today?
Inflation is slowing down. We have seen, compared to 12 months ago, transportation rates, labor rates slowing down. So we are definitely seeing a much more stable environment. Difficult to say, of course, how this situation with shipping around the Red Sea is going to impact inflation. Too early to tell. We are seeing some rates, as I said before, I've seen some rates already spiking. We believe that we are going to be able to manage that, and there are so many routing options that could divert traffic around, and ultimately will be longer delays and some move of freight into air freight, which we can also, of course, help our customers with that. So too early to say. The impact of inflation is a very fluid environment, but we are confident that we will be helping our customers resolve this situation.
I want to get your take on the picture of the global economy here, because I know Europe is so critical for DHL, 50% of business, 50% of revenue, and a lot of people expect Europe is actually weakening faster than the United States. What is your take on the European demand story, and what about China? Because here you're talking about a different set of issues, perhaps a property plummeting, a property issue that's taking the economy down. How significant is that slowdown in China right now?
It's an excellent question, because the significant growth in Europe is happening or is coming from China inbound. We are seeing, although the European economies might be slowing down from a growth perspective, we are still seeing a very aggressive growth of Chinese companies selling into Europe, and they're very motivated to diversify, of course, the revenue source outside of China, which is, as we all know, not growing that fast, into Europe. So from our perspective, we are benefiting from that. We're benefiting from the Chinese domestic economy slowing down, Chinese marketplaces and merchants willing to diversify their revenue source outside of China and selling into Europe, and of course we're working with all of those Chinese companies selling into Europe. So I think that the slowdown in Europe, in the domestic markets, is compensated by significant China inbound into the European markets.
And Europe, do you think we'll see lower rates there? Is that something that will boost the situation? They're saying that Europe, ECB is going to cut rates before the Fed.
Yes, that might likely happen. We are optimistic, cautiously optimistic about the outlook in Europe for the next 12 months. Probably the next 6 months are going to be looking very similar to today, but we are optimistic that the second half of next year is going to be looking better.
Pablo, it's great to have you this morning. Did I miss anything that you want to make sure our audience understands about DHL?
You covered everything. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for being here. Pablo Ciano, my special guest, CEO of DHL.